You once believed in Santa Claus, completely, and on real evidence. Then, one day, you didn't. What happened in between is the most important thing your mind ever does. The story we inherit. Every belief begins somewhere. Before we can test it, a story is handed to us. At bedtime, in rituals, in a room full of trusted voices. It arrives through the people we love and trust. Repetition makes it familiar. Belonging makes it ours. By the time we are able to question it, it is already part of who we are. We accept most of what we know on testimony, from parents, teachers, and authorities. That trust is normal and necessary. It becomes a trap only when one source is placed beyond all questioning. This is not unique to any one faith. Children gather for fables. Congregations gather for scripture. Crowds gather for the stories that hold a people together. The pattern is human. So let us be precise. This is not an attack on Muslims. It is an examination of Islam as an ideology and an apologetic system. Its claims, its sources, and the methods used to defend them. And it is not a claim that believers are children or cannot reason. It is a claim that sacred stories can train intelligent people to defend a conclusion before they weigh the evidence. First, a story we have all already solved. We already know how this works, because almost all of us once believed something completely on exactly this kind of evidence. Think of Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny. To a small child, the case for Santa is overwhelming. Every trusted adult confirms him, and the proof is physical. The half-eaten cookies, the chewed carrot, the gifts that match a secret wish list. Research finds belief peaks around age 5, at nearly 85%. And the more real-world Santas a child meets, the stronger the conviction grows. Testimony and evidence reinforce each other. Then the questions change. The child stops asking what the reindeer are named, and starts asking how one man reaches 800 million homes in a single night. The questions move from detail to physics. Psychologists have a name for this. Jean Piaget called it the shift from magical thinking to concrete logic, from a mind that blends fantasy with reality to one that tests a story against the laws of the world. By around age 8, most children have solved it themselves. On average, it takes 4 to 5 years of quiet reasoning. Often, a friend supplies the final clue. And here's what matters most. When children solve it, the vast majority do not feel betrayed. They feel proud. It is their first real victory in critical thinking. Fewer than 1 in 10 carry any lasting resentment. Some, knowing the truth, keep playing along. To protect a ritual their family loves. The belief is gone. The performance continues, out of loyalty. Even that has a familiar shape. Now take that same investigator's eye and turn it toward a story that is never meant to reach the reveal, where asking the physics is not rewarded, but discouraged, and where the stakes are no longer cookies and gifts, but morality itself. Because at the center of this story sits a protected conclusion, that Muhammad must remain a perfect moral example, for all people for all times. Islamic sources present him as the model to follow. That single commitment changes everything. Troubling reports are no longer distant history. They become a test the ideology must pass. Now, the collision, where the inherited story meets the facts. Then the inherited story meets the modern world and its hard external standards. Consent, the protection of children, evidence, due process, and a morality meant to apply to everyone. The sources report that Muhammad married Aisha when she was 6 and consummated the marriage when she was 9. Under any contemporary standard, an adult's sexual access to a 9-year-old is child sexual abuse. Marriage, a guardian's approval, and the practice of that time do not create a child's consent. Sophia was taken after her people were defeated in battle and her husband was killed. On that same day, she was made the prophet's wife. The sources themselves place her in conquest, in captivity, and in grief. To call what followed a free choice, we would have to ignore the power that surrounded her at that particular time. Quran 4, verse 34, instructs a man, if he fears disobedience from his wife, that she may be struck as a last resort. In a major translation, the plain word is exactly that: strike. Placed beside modern standards on domestic violence, this is a direct moral conflict, one the defense must somehow dissolve. Quran 33, verse 50, grants the Prophet marital permissions described as his alone, not shared by other believers. A rule that applies to one man, by special exemption, is not ordinary ethics. It is privilege written into Scripture. After the Battle of the Trench, the men of the tribe of Banu Qurayza were executed, and the women and children were enslaved. Hundreds were killed on the judgment of a single arbiter, and, by report, boys were checked for signs of puberty to decide who would die. The modern justice system rejects collective punishment, and therefore rejects this. 5 cases. 5 collisions between a protected story and the standards we apply to everyone else. What happens next is the real subject of this film. Watch, then, how the story defends itself. When the facts collide with the sacred story, the response is rarely a single answer. It is a kit of moves, used in rotation. Start with the shape of the whole thing. The Texas sharpshooter fires first and paints the target around the bullet holes afterward. Here, the conclusion is fixed first. Muhammad is righteous, and each troubling case is reinterpreted until it appears to fit. The target is always drawn after the shot. Friendly evidence is waved through. Threatening evidence is interrogated. That asymmetry is confirmation bias, and it runs underneath every move that follows. When ordinary words create a moral crisis, the words are moved. This is semantic retreat. Consent becomes puberty. Captivity becomes protection. Strike becomes a light tap or a symbol. Mass execution becomes treason and wartime law. When a defense works only because Muhammad is the one acting, that is special pleading. Quran 33:50 makes it explicit, a permission for him that no one else may claim. 2 quieter biases do heavy lifting. The halo effect. Reverence for his prophethood spills over onto every act. And moral licensing. Because he is assumed righteous, conduct that would condemn another is read charitably. Watch how the sources are handled. The same hadith collections are trusted for doctrine, and then doubted, precisely when a report becomes morally costly. This is a double bind of their own making. Accept the hadith, and the moral problem stands. Reject it, and the authority of the whole tradition weakens. And when ethics still presses, the question itself is changed. No longer, was this act just? The question, instead, is this: did God permit it? The moral question is not answered. It is bypassed. Around all of this, a wall is built. Outside critics are dismissed as ignorant or hostile. Believers who reject the troubling doctrines are told they are not real Muslims. Only approved voices are allowed to count. And leaving is costly. Years of prayer, family, friendship, and identity are bound up in the story. To doubt it can mean losing a community. So the mind protects the belief to protect the life built around it. Notice what every move has in common. None of them begins with the evidence. They all begin with the conclusion and work backward to protect it. But why would anyone reason this way? Why would intelligent, sincere people reason this way? Because this is not a flaw of one faith. It is how the human mind defends any belief tied to identity. Decades of research describe the same machine. Motivated reasoning. Ziva Kunda showed that people often reason toward the conclusions they want, building whatever justifications they can. The mind does not only ask what is true, it asks how to keep believing what it needs to be true. Biased assimilation. Lord, Ross, and Lepper found that people with strong prior views read mixed evidence in the way that strengthens the belief they started with. Belief perseverance. The same researchers showed that beliefs can survive even after the evidence that first created them has been discredited. Identity protective cognition. Dan Kahan found that people judge facts, and even who counts as an expert, through loyalty to their group. Cognitive dissonance. Leon Festinger documented believers who, when reality contradicted the belief, reinterpreted reality rather than give the belief up. The original study drew criticism, but the pattern it named is well established. Sacred values. Tetlock and Atron showed that when a value is held as sacred, people refuse to weigh it in ordinary costs and benefits. That is why the fact that a child cannot consent can be overridden by the claim that God permitted it. Put together, the finding is simple and human. When a belief is bound to identity, sacred authority, and belonging, people reinterpret facts, redefine words, and weigh evidence selectively to protect it. Which leaves the only question that matters. How do we tell what is true? So how do we cut through it? The same way a fair court does. We apply the rule before we know who the actor is. Before the religion, what does consent require? Before the scripture, what does justice require? Before the prophet, what would we call the act if anyone else had done it? 5 questions decide it. Power, consent, harm, evidence, exception. If the rule changes only once Muhammad enters the room, we are not watching ethics. We are watching special pleading. And notice the circle the defense finally rests on. He is moral because God approved him. And we know God approved him because his revelation says so. The conclusion guards itself. Fairness cuts both ways. Historical context can explain conduct. It cannot morally vindicate it. The weakest defenses, in this particular matter, are child marriage and sexual access to captives. The strongest, though still contestable, rest on genuine wartime conflict. This is the journey, from a story we inherit to a standard we can defend, from naivety to coherence, from protecting a conclusion to following the evidence wherever it leads. It is the step every person can take, with any inherited belief, to love the people who handed you the story, and still test the story itself. We let a child outgrow Santa, and we call it growing up. The harder question is whether we allow ourselves the same freedom with the stories we were told never to question. A story becomes powerful when it is repeated, and dangerous when it cannot be questioned. An ideology, by itself, is neither good nor bad. It is simply a system of ideas that aspires both to explain the world and to change it. But the one we have examined here can be sustained in only one way: by bending morality itself to fit the story. Not every ideology must do that. This one does.